What I'd like y'all to do is to introduce yourselves and how you are in relation
Oh,
to
all
Nanette.
right.
Kim Watson, um, one of Nanette's younger sisters on her dad's side.
Okay, and Randy?
Randy Gretchen, and I am Kim's other half for the last 10 years.
Okay. And Lori?
I'm Lori Rando. I was Nanette's best friend. We went to high school together there at Chappelle.
Okay. And Gina?
Hi, Gina Watson, Nanette's cousin through her dad's side.
Okay. I want to echo what Larry said and telling you thank you. It is an honor and a privilege to us that y'all were willing to come on. And to just give a brief background to our listeners, when we first did this series and we went on with this case, we strictly went off of what you could Google on the site called.
So on the Justice for Nanette page, there's a something that covered it, uncovered.com.
Yep.
And we just basically went off of the timeline that uncovered.com provided, with the intention of just bringing the case back up. Little did we know we was going to get such a large outpour from the community of not only questions, but support in trying to solve the case. So luckily, Brian knew somebody connected to everything, and I'm sorry about that. We were put in touch with somebody connected to the case, and then put in touch with y'all. So our hopes now is to get information that maybe hasn't been released on Uncovered or hasn't been talked about in such time that we can kind of refresh the public of what happened and try to get some, not you never get closure, but some answers to this puzzle.
Right. And like I told y'all when we first talked, that is our main objective here at the Sound of Sirens, is to keep attention on this case so that we can bring a solvency to it. And I've only spoken to Randy and Kim, so I appreciate Lori and Gina being willing to come on. In the brief time that I've gotten to talk to Randy and Kim, I think y'all are some great people, and whatever we can do that's going to help you is what we want to do.
We appreciate that.
So to start, and like Larry said, and I told y'all on the phone, we're gonna, kind of rehash the beginning when y'all first got notified of this. Let's start at that point from the initial call, not so much to y'all, but the initial call, the response of the first responders, and then let's get into the investigation part and go through that, just to give a little background for any listeners that this is their first time hearing about the case. You can start wherever you want, Kim. I mean, I guess we should go back to, I'll start it this way. Obviously, there was some things that were going on before the fire at the house where Nanette had been emailing your father, correct?
Yes, and she was talking to him on the phone every day also.
And she shared some concerns for her well-being, that she was receiving some threats.
She was receiving some threats from her brother-in-law.
And I mean, we in the first part we went over that, what he said specifically, all off of the Uncovered website. And when we did part one, that was my big thing that I kept telling Larry. We're going off of a website. I'm not saying that information isn't true, but to have a family come on and corroborate that's what helps. So she was receiving some threats, and I do believe the way it was worded in the, and Lori or Gina, at any time you want to add in, please do. The threats were specific to what would happen to her by the brother-in-law.
She said that when Brian was in prison, he was upset, was sending them letters, and that had threatened to rape her, kill her and Steve, and burn their house to the ground. And he was going to be on the news. That was the last part of it.
So, as we get into the case, just knowing that she's told y'all that, and then for the actual call y'all get that there was a fire at the house, and it pretty much matches what the threat was against her.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I went off of the timeline that we were sent by everybody from the family, and basically to just kind of recap, because this is a part 2. We already did the part 1. Aside from y'all, Nanette and Steve were married in '95. So from '95 to '09, there's basically I wouldn't say a lack of things, but it's virtually untouched as far as threats or anything like that. Now in '09, the first affair, and I'm gonna say affair for now, happens with the secretary. Now I know we talked, and you divulge whatever information you feel you would like to divulge, and I'm not going to force y'all to say anything or even a speculation, but us as a podcast received an email anonymously from somebody that was directly involved with the fire department. Sure. So in '09, there was the first affair with the secretary, and then a second affair occurred in 2010. That was accompanied with threats of exactly what happened to Nanette.
Is that correct, Kim, or Lori, or Gina?
You don't have anything to prove it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So, along with the affairs, there was word that threats were made towards Nanette with the exact nature of how she was ultimately, for lack of a better word, killed. The timeline also states that the second woman and her husband were threatened by Steve, implying that both of them knew about the relationship, and I guess it was amicable, like Nanette was okay with it. Do y'all have any insight to if that was any truth to that, or if that was just kind of like a hearsay thing?
Lori?
Yeah, I think Lori would probably have better information.
Yeah, Nanette was not okay with it. We had met for lunch just before her birthday. Now, this was in 2015. And that's when she told me that Steve was having an affair with one of the women at the firehouse. At the time, I did not know her name. I did not know how many times this had happened previous. She had only disclosed to me the present one that was happening. But like any woman, I know Steve has said this in the past that she was okay with it. No woman is okay with their husband or boyfriend or significant other having an affair on them. That's completely not true.
Amen to that. I agree, and I'm glad you're responding, Lori, because I'm thinking like an investigator here that is a question that a best friend could answer, because you're a confidant, and sometimes a man or a woman may not want to go to a family member with that yet, but they may go to a best friend and a confidant. So thank you for, one, being there for, and then two, answering that question that way.
Of
So
course.
let's get to, we know about the, like you're saying, the accusations of cheating, that it hadn't so much been verified. Nanette had talked to you about it, and let's kind of fast forward, because I think this is where this becomes an actual eye opener. when I sat and researched what little bit I did with the uncovered site, my initial response, and I told Randy and Kim this, so Lori and Gina, this will be the first time you hear it. I sat there like in shock because I'm like, what? Like the basic first day that you're an investigator, this is the things you look for, and it just seemed like it was ignored. So Kim or Lori or Gina, who was first notified about the fire?
My dad.
And he was notified by who? Steve?
Yep, Steve called him and left a message. And they were actually, dad and mom, my mom were out of town. And Steve left him a message. Dad went outside where he could hear, and then he called him back. Steve told him there had been a fire and that Nanette was in it. And he called me, and I think he also called my younger sister.
Okay. So y'all notified. How quick was the response for you getting where y'all live at? And I know y'all out of town. I don't think it's necessary I say where you live at, but from where y'all live and your dad to get here to Lacombe.
We found out Friday evening, and we were staying in touch, and I should say Dan was staying in touch with Steve. And we found out through another source on Saturday night, probably close to 30 hours after we first found out about the fire, that the coroner wanted Dan to do DNA so he could properly identify and make a positive ID. Steve never told us any of that. He was withholding that information. I don't know why he didn't, aside from not wanting us there. So we made plans real quickly and left early Sunday morning and arrived down there about the 18-hour drive to get there, and we arrived. That's where it started for us when we got there, and met up with Steve that evening, I believe, because at this point, Dan still,
Didn't want to believe that
where
anything bad happened. Wanted to believe it was an accident.
Yeah,
Right.
where I had serious reserves, and Kim had some reserves with Steve, but just because the facts made no sense from what we were told and what the actual things going on were.
Right. So Dan wasn't actually contacted by the coroner or the sheriff's office or anything like that. It was a direct communication with Steve, and Steve is the one that actually let him know that they wanted a DNA sample from him.
No,
Didn't tell him. Steve was
Steve's
avoiding that basically.
Steve
Oh, okay.
told Dad about the fire and about Nanette's death, and so me being we're up here, we're so far away from her, so I just started looking for other family members or anybody down there who might know, and came across her younger brother Chad on her mom's side, and messaged him, and he called in. He's actually the one that told us the coroner wants Dad's DNA so he can positively identify the remains. And we were a little confused, but we're like, all right, get in the car, let's go.
Okay, so Lori, how soon were you notified in regards to the fire?
Well, hold on, just to elaborate on that a little. No, the sheriff and the coroner, none of the authorities down there contacted us. And when we asked them why later, they told us Dan's not family. Only her husband is.
Oh, that's crazy.
That was the sheriff's office.
Right. I mean, I understand what they're saying, Randy. You go into the next of kin, but you know what? that I'm not saying they right in it. I guess that's okay because you want to notify the next of kin. She's married, so it would be the husband. And then I guess he could be the one that notifies everybody else. But there wouldn't have been anything wrong with anybody speaking to Dan being the father.
Well, I totally get what they're saying, that the husband is the next of kin, but just their comment so arrogantly to say to Dan that you're not the father. You're not family. That's what it was. You're not family.
Right, and
Her
that's what
only
I'm saying.
family they consider is her husband. And it's just the way they said it from the sheriff's staff and the coroner.
And I understand what you're saying. I'm not trying to dispute your feelings on it. I agree. I mean, if it was my daughter, I am her family. I'm her father. You know. Um, but to go back on Lori for just a minute, Lori, how soon did you know about the incident?
So, that night, that Friday night, it was pretty late. It was probably after 10:30, and I was on. I had a private message pop up on Facebook, and it was a girl who we had also gone to high school with, who told me. She said, "I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, but Nanette died in a fire today." And this girl and I don't necessarily talk at all or, chat on Facebook or anything. So I really thought she had me confused with somebody else. I thought she was had something completely wrong. And I said, you must be confused. I, just talked to tonight. And she said, no, I'm really sorry. My next door neighbor is a fireman, and he was at the scene, and he knew that we went to school together. So he came over and told me, you can go on nolas.com and you can see it. And so I did just that because I still was not believing her. And that's the first thing that popped up on NOLA.com at the time was the picture of the two policemen looking at the scene of the destroyed house. And the first words out of my mouth, the very first words was, they killed her. They killed her. I didn't know anything from anything. I knew nothing. Those were the first words that came out of my mouth.
Wow.
So, I mean, not to, I guess, ask the obvious question, but for that to be the first thing that popped into your head was to think they killed her. Can you elaborate on why you might have felt that way instantaneous? Like, had she told you something that would lead you to believe that had taken place?
Yeah, like Kim was saying, now prior to July 14th, I knew about Kim, I knew about Lisa, I knew about Dan, but I had never met them. I had never talked to them. I just knew them through Nanette. And so Nanette had shared with me similar emails, how terrified she was of Brian, how, scared she was of him, how they had put in all kinds of extra security around their house because of him. She stated in one email that she had literally called the prison and begged them not to early release Brian because she was so scared of him, and they simply apologized and said that there was overcrowding and that he was going to be released. So because I knew this in the back of my head about Brian, and I didn't necessarily trust Steve, only because he was just so controlling of her and everything she did, everywhere she went, everyone she spoke to, that I was like, I just knew these two had to be involved. I had nothing to prove it. I had the time. I didn't know how she had even necessarily died. They kept trying to tell me that there was a thunderstorm in the afternoon that day and lightning struck the house and it caught it on fire. She presumably went back in to rescue one or more of her pets and got overtaken by smoke. But I did not believe that. I didn't believe one bit of the story, not necessarily the lightning, although I really didn't believe that. But there was just no way. As much as she loved those animals, I just could not see her going back into a fully engulfed house to try to rescue them. I wasn't buying it. I wasn't.
Okay. Gina, you still with us?
Yes.
And how quick did you know about the incident?
Well, actually, July 14th is my birthday, and my dad called, and I thought he was calling to say happy birthday because it was in the evening. It would be the normal time when he would after work and all that. And he instead told me that my cousin had passed away. And of course, I didn't grow up with Nanette, but I'm immediately thinking Kim or Lisa. And then he's saying, no, it's Nanette in New Orleans. And then the first thing I thought of was, he said she died in a fire. And I said, wasn't her husband the fire chief? Like that was just so weird to me that initially that was the first thing I thought of. Like it just seemed very strange to me that that's how she died.
Yeah. First and foremost, information new to me, and I'm sure Brian as well. I'm so sorry you had to even deal with that. I mean, I know you said you and Nanette hadn't really grown up together, but nonetheless, that's still family, and no one wants to hear that kind of information on their birthday. So that's terrible.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
been an interesting way to share my birthday with her.
So we we all get the call. We all know the information that's being said in regards to the fire and in regards to Nanette's loss of life. Everybody's got their suspicion, but when you come to town, what's what are you met with, Randy and Kim, in regards to how it's being handled?
Well, when we got to town Sunday, we didn't know much. All we had was what Steve was telling us, which we find out later is a lot of partial truth, or depending how you look at a lie, he was purposely not telling us certain things.
Well, we got there and we knew that Dad needed to meet with the coroner. And I told him I said, Dad, you are not going anywhere without me. And of course, he disappears. I don't know where he went. I went into the gas station where we were at the hotel. And here I see Steve's truck pulling out, and I all but chase him down. And they go, and Steve took Dad to the coroner without us, because I think Dad knew at that point what kind of attitude everyone was going to face if I was there. And then Dad gets brought back and tells us that they went out to the house without me again. So I said, well, that's fine, but I'm going out there. We're going. I need to see this. And we get there. There's no law enforcement. There's no fire department. No one's there. It's completely empty. The gate's open, and there's nothing protecting the scene. Everything is still there except for Nanette. And I am
I'm sorry to cut you
absolutely.
off. How long, again, after the initial, like, I know that the incident took place was the 14th. How long after the 14th was this for there to be no presence?
We seen it first on the morning of the 17th, but found out later that they had released the scene, I believe, just before, just over 24 hours after the initial call.
Yeah.
Okay, so as a current firefighter, I'm an employed firefighter. That's common to release a structure once I guess they would deem their investigation is complete. But as we all know from doing the research and reading what we've all read, the search was deemed by most of y'all inadequate. They left some things they shouldn't have left. You know, some things weren't even looked at. And then, like you saying, there was no barricade around the home. There was no way to keep anybody out. So contamination's a big issue. What are some other things that kind of drew a little bit of concern from y'all?
Well, just like you were saying, it's not uncommon to release even a bad fire scene within 24 hours. But once you have a fatality at least up here where we live, once you have a fatality and you don't know if you have any foul play, any possible crime, at least up here, that scene is not released. But I don't know how normal is down there. But I will tell you, I've never been on a scene where firearms were left out in the open, where there was a fatality and a scene was released so quickly. And where a proper investigation wasn't even done. When we arrived on scene, this looked like a scene where it would look an hour after you have it all extinguished.
And I think, not to jump in here, Randy, having talked to you, that y'all are both correct in a structure fire of any structure of size where there's no death, no nothing. Okay, they may release that within 24 hours.
Right.
We obviously know we have a death in the fire
So
that we have not, at the time you saying it's released and within 24 hours, it shouldn't have been, because we don't know if in fact that death occurred because of the fire. And then the fact that there's numerous weapons still within the confines of the fire. There's no reason that it should have been, at least in my mind, there's no reason it should have been released and everybody left. They should have kept somebody there, because it was like, okay, let's hurry up and get out of here. There shouldn't have been a hurry up. It should have been a, let's take our time and do the steps that need to be done. And we not only spoke about that on the phone with me and you, but here today I still feel that way. Why was the scene released when you still have all of that there? And I'm going to assume that within that 24-hour period, they had already realized that there was accelerant throughout the scene, correct?
I'm not sure when they realized there was accelerant. I will say that we know the State Fire Marshal's office had, I believe, 2 investigators minimum, but we know one for sure because we met him. And I don't know any fire investigator that's properly trained, and this guy was supposed to be a longtime investigator, that would not have already determined there was accelerant. I looked at it when we pulled up, and I told Kim, this did not burn naturally. There was a lot of accelerant. Something was made to make this burn very hot, very fast.
We didn't do this earlier, and I only learned this from our communications when we first met and started talking. You have not only prior experience, but you're currently involved in the fire service where you live at, correct?
I am. I am in my 32nd year.
Okay. So, without even sitting here and say, Randy, give me all your certifications and classes you've gone in 32 years, you've seen enough fires that were either electrical, caused by lightning, or created through arson with an accelerant.
Yeah, quite a few. And, just to back it up, I've been through multiple fire investigation classes, and you both are previous fire. I believe one of you or both are previous law enforcement. As you know, you have to go through a lot of different classes and certifications just to maintain the minimum. With all that, when we pulled up, I not only knew it burned very hot, which would not be normal, even with a metal roof down there in the south. I knew I had asked Steve what kind of early determinations they came up with. He said, it's burnt too bad they can't tell. I said, okay, how about a area of origin or a place of origin? Same answer, burnt too bad they can't tell. I said, how about just an area of the house, a side corner? And he goes, burnt too bad they can't tell. And I looked at him and I go, I've been here less than 5 minutes, and I can tell you normally the hottest part of the fire is the place of origin. That can be altered with accelerants and other things, as you guys know. But I looked at him and I said, I can tell you most likely the point of origin is right there. And he didn't say a word to me. He turned around, walked away, and he was done talking to me.
And
He didn't want to talk to me about anything.
the right there, where were you alluding to, if you don't mind me asking?
The hottest spot of that fire when you were looking at the front of the house, and I don't remember which way the house faces, but when you're looking at the front door, the hottest area would have been to the rear on the right,
Okay.
which would have been over in the bathroom area where her body was found.
Okay. So, in talk, you said you actually met one of the state fire marshal investigators. Did they allude to any charring from a particular spot or anything? And in reading a lot of what I read, it seemed like Steve was trying to say that the house was struck by lightning, that he was adamant the house was struck by lightning. And was there anything left standing of the structure on the roof to say that you could have had evidence that lightning actually struck it?
The saying there was nothing left, no, there was. It was minimal, but there were still some wood studs, wall framing left in part of the structure, very little, but it had a tin roof. He did claim the lightning. I did not have a chance, or I should say chance, or the ability to overlook or take a close look at the metal roof because all the tin was still there. But we were able to show later on, looking at, I believe it was National Weather or some other agency, there was no lightning strikes in that area that day at that time. So that ruled out any lightning possibilities.
Did he? I have to ask you this: Did Steve know your experience, your work background?
He knew I was on a fire department, but that's all the further he knew. He had no idea how many years I've had in, and he had no idea what training I may or may not have had.
And I'm going with, because he was lying, and he figured he could get over on the family since y'all not living here at the time when all this goes on. So he's figuring he's the fire chief, you're not. If I tell you that, it was because of the friction of two boards that rubbed together is what caused the fire, you're just going to believe me. And,
exactly. I think that's what he was definitely betting on. And just assumed he could say what he wanted. No different than it was either the night before, Sunday night, or Monday night. We were out, and he joined us. I think people wanted to go try them things you guys call beignets, the square donuts with powdered sugar. And he was
yes, beignets.
he was complaining that he couldn't believe that the bank and loan companies were going to make him make his car payments and his house payment when he didn't have them anymore because they burn up. Now, this guy is the fire chief of a fairly, sounds like, well-populated area. He's definitely not in a town of 300 and just as the fire chief because he's a 22-year-old kid and his dad used to be the fire chief. This guy should have the knowledge, and he should have had to explain to people many times throughout his career this exact same scenario that, hey, you're still responsible for all this. You need to keep making your payments till your insurance comes through and they pay it off. To sit there and tell us he was shocked he still had to make all his payments. One, who gives a shit about your payments when your wife just died in the fire? Two, he knows it's a blatant lie because he's had to explain the situation to who knows how many families or people over the years that he was in the paid fire service.
Well,
I'm sorry, Randy. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And as a fire chief, why would you not want your property that is just burned completely secured until a proper investigation could take place? Especially knowing that your wife had died in the fire. Why would you be so much of a rush to try to just, release the scene and, come what may, whatever investigation happens after that.
That's a great question. That was a question we had when we were there. Another thing that really struck me odd was, I don't know how much of the news reports you guys have already seen. I know Lori's seen it. I know Gina's seen it. Kim and I, we've all seen it numerous times. Steve actually showed it to us on his phone at dinner one night while we were down there. We were there for a week from when we found out Dan was needed and we left and got there Sunday evening. We were there till probably an hour after the funeral when we got in our car and went back home. And we spent a lot of dinners and time off and on with Steve. And I, like I told you before, I had my suspicions as soon as Kim told me, because you guys are in a part of the country where if you sleep normal hours, if you're mobile, you do not die in a house fire because you're all one level. Almost every room has exits to the outside. It is almost unheard of, unless there's outside circumstances, that somebody will die in a normal house fire. And then you throw on top of it, he showed us the video at dinner on his phone of his camera in his truck, what we refer to up here as like a tattletale camera. If you brake too hard, accelerate too fast, turn too sharp, it records in front of the vehicle and in the cab to see what you're doing and what's going on outside the vehicle that you're going towards. And he showed us that as he pulled up to the house, it was setting it off because he was hitting bumps hard, accelerating, braking hard. And as soon as he turned the corner where the house was in sight, no surprising look on his face, no rush to get the vehicle to a certain spot and jump out and go see what's, find your wife. He pulls up, stops. You can see his passenger looks like he just shit himself. But Steve isn't shocked at all. And then I find out, because I asked him what he did when he got there. And he said there was the first DEW truck in was right behind him. So he jumped off, grabbed a pre-connect, and they got him water. And instead of spraying the house, he's spraying his garage that's getting hot and starting to smoke to keep that from going.
I gotta stop you right there for just a second, Randy. Just so I'm making this. Steve got there before the actual fire truck got there, correct?
Yes, when he pulled in, you could see on his tattletale camera, there was a law enforcement at the front gate that is their own gate into their private drive that leads back to, I believe, his cousin's house and his and Nanette's house. And then to get to his cousin's, I believe it's a straight shot, but right before his cousin's, it does almost a 90-degree and goes over to the front of Steve and Nan's house. And when he made the turn, there was another law enforcement car there. There were no trucks there. They were right behind him, the first truck due in. But yeah, instead of getting out, hollering for your wife, Nanette, where are you? Trying to find her, instead of asking law enforcement, hey, have you seen her around? Has anybody looked around? Have you walked around, looked at anything? Some of the first things, as not only any officer on a fire department, but a chief, you don't attack the fire. You do your surround and assess the fire while your guys are grabbing hose, getting ready to do what you instruct them to do. He grabs a hose and he's out to protect his garage with all his stuff in it, the detached building, not looking for his wife. I found that odd too. The other thing was, he told us, because I asked him, I said, what condition was it in when you got there? He said the house was down. Well, both of you would know, when a firefighter tells you the house is down, that means it's all the way down.
Right,
the
total,
roof is
total
collapsed
collapse.
onto the ground. The walls have failed. You ain't got nothing but a pile.
Right, and
Right.
at that point, it becomes, for lack of a better term, a large trash fire. You just surround and drown it.
Exactly. Well, you were already to the point where you basically needed to surround and drown. But he said it was down, and anybody that's been in the industry long enough knows that isn't, you don't just use that as a blanket term for anything.
No.
That's a specific term and meaning. And when he pulled up, like I told you, his tattletale shows the cab and the front of the truck.
Mm.
The structure was completely erect. It was fully engulfed, but it was still completely standing everywhere.
Right.
Well,
So,
having been previous, like I said, when we talked on the phone, my biggest concern with it is, as an investigator, I would want to know. I mean, it's common. Him not even being a fire chief, Lori or Gina, they're not in the fire industry. But if their house caught on fire and they presume that their husband or children were in there, they're going to be more concerned with that than they're going to be worrying about fighting a garage fire.
well, not only that. Let's look at it on the terms of how he's bringing it up. A chief is normally the person who assesses the whole entire situation, does a 360, secures electric, whatever he's got to do to then instruct his crew what to do. Let's say he actually did grab a pre-connect and started actually proceeding to fight the fire. You would think, if what you're saying is fact, that the building was still erect, it was just fully engulfed, he would do like maybe bust out a window where the fire was most prominent, try to cool down the interior in case they had to make an interior attack, or just shoot the seat of the fire. Like you're saying, he's protecting something that isn't even part of the situation yet.
I'm not even going there. I'm going straight to if he didn't have, to me, this is just my opinion, Randy, Kim, Lori, and Gina, and everybody else listening. If he didn't have some type of pre-knowledge to something, when your adrenaline is already flowing when you get called to a structure fire. Now you telling me I'm getting dispatched to my house for a structure fire.
Yeah.
You're gonna somewhat forget all protocol because all you thinking about is that's my wife in there. I need to know where she's at. I need to find her. You're not. I promise you. I would think that nobody in their right frame of mind is thinking about, well, I got to get this hydrant and hook to that. No, you looking for your loved one.
Right.
And to off of what Randy is saying and other ways we looked into this, he showed no interest in trying to find out where his wife was. Mm-hmm. He showed an interest to, and really not a whole lot of interest, but to fighting protecting a building that he shouldn't even been worried about.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
And another thing, just so we're clear for anyone in the audience listening, because I probably didn't describe it well enough. I probably wouldn't expect him to grab a hose and attack the house because it was fully engulfed, but it was fully engulfed to the point windows were gone, walls were even ate through. You could see in the video all the studs standing up. The siding was burnt through, and so the rock was gone. The
So
sheetrock. So
then just off your experience.
In the building.
Good.
I'm sorry.
There's inside of the house at that point. So I understand not attacking the house, but who the hell goes and tries to save their material things in their garage when you still don't know if your wife is alive or dead?
So right. I read that the reason he knew Nanette was even in the house is because he saw her car in the garage. Is that true?
He said he knew she was in the house because he saw her garage. Now, how many times have you pulled up on a fire scene, even if it's a loss, I mean a total loss, fully engulfed or even close to it, and cars are in the garage, may have cars in the driveway. May have been reported when the call came out that 6 occupants in the building, we believe they're all in there. But you pull up, and there's a bunch of very stressed out, distraught looking people sitting in the driveway of the street or the front yard or the neighbor's yard because they all got out of the house.
Right.
Right.
He's not looking for any of that. He's just worried about his material things.
Right.
And the other thing is, it's in a rural area. If I got that same call, one, he's got a radio that has access to all the area in there. Am I going to rely on dispatch just to dispatch the fire department assigned to my address? Hell no. I'm going to have 6, 7 other departments as far out as I can reach on their way there.
Well, I don't know how it is over there because it is a totally different jurisdiction, Randy. But like when we talked on the phone, and I know when I was a policeman, my address was known. You know, like when if a 911 call come from it or a policeman's house, when dispatch, they would say this is the residence of. So
Exactly.
I'm going to go ahead and assume that when they dispatched, they said this is the chief or this is Chief
100%.
so and so's residence, so that and I don't want to make it sound like, well, we do more when it's one of ours than when it's just going out to a citizen's house, but you do kind of take pride in wanting to, go a little overboard for your brother, and that's just a
Absolutely.
human. That's just a human nature thing. So I'm gonna assume they knew this is his house.
Yeah, and I'll agree with. I won't say we do more if it's someone we know, because unfortunately, I've been on a fatality that involved a family member of one of my own departments, not even a neighboring department. And it's not that you do more, but I guarantee you, you get a lot better turnout. You might take a
Right.
few more risks than you would take otherwise that you
Right.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
So, all right, we to the fire. We're hearing, the things Steve has done and said. How quick were y'all as friends and family notified of like the coroner and his findings?
We were not involved in that because the coroner, that's when we were told we are not family, not even her dad. Only Steve. We got to get all our information from Steve. Yeah, we can get public information. That's it.
Okay.
So how transparent was Steve with y'all throughout the process, or was he kind of not giving y'all a cold shoulder, but just kind of being almost secretive about what was going on?
He was acting like he was giving us everything. As we found out later, he was giving us very little bits and pieces and not even all truthful stuff. He was telling us what he wanted us to hear.
But where were you learning that from? I mean, and I'm not asking you to give me a name, but like, what type of source was letting you know that, hey, Steve is telling you A, B, but he's leaving out C and D?
Well, there was the blog, Louisiana Voice or something like that, where the guy found out that Nanette had been shot in the head, and we found out later that Steve had to have known that sooner as well.
Yes,
but he didn't let on.
That's a good one to bring up, Gina, because we found that out the morning of the funeral. And I don't remember if it was in person. I think, yeah, it was in person. At the church, I told him, hey, we've been informed that she's got a gunshot wound to the head. And his words to me were, yeah, I got to talk to you about that later. And then he never talked to me about it and claimed he didn't know about it at a later date till after we told him.
Oh,
what kind of shit is that?
And we told law enforcement that also.
And let me just say that we drove in on Wednesday, the Wednesday after the fire and the Wednesday before the service. And on my drive in, we have a very close-knit class from Chappelle. And another classmate informed me on Wednesday before the funeral that she was shot in the head. And she'd heard that from a investigator that was on the scene. So I knew on Wednesday she was shot. Wednesday afternoon when I got into town, I called Detective Buckner and I point blank asked him, and he said, I can neither confirm nor deny. And then Friday comes around, we're at the service. The service ends, we go to the reception afterwards in the little hall. And by that time, it's, now about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This is when all the 4 o'clock news stations start, coming on. And all of a sudden, everybody's phone starts blowing up. And everybody's looking at the phone. They started looking at me. They're looking at the phone. I'm like, what are y'all looking at? And they were like that. And then they read off that, she was found with a bullet in her head. And I was like, yeah, I already knew. Like, it was not a surprise. So people had known prior to obviously Friday. In fact, after the service, because pretty much after that happened, they kind of cleared everybody out. A group came, surrounded Steve, took him out. Firefighters surrounded Steve, took him out of the hall, and then they pretty much kicked the rest of us out. And I was walking to the parking lot, and I ran into his son, Justin, and kind of asked him, or say my, goodbyes. And he's like, so what do you know about this? And I'm like, I don't know anything. What do you know about this? And he claims that he was told by Detective Buckner on that Monday, so right afterwards, so like the 17th, he was told that Monday from Buckner that she was shot, but not to tell his dad. And when I confronted Buckner with that statement, he completely denied any of that happened.
Well, I'm glad not to cut you off, I'm sorry. I'm glad you brought that up because we've already kind of talked about the threats from Brian in regard to like the emails to Dan saying, basically he was going to do exactly what played out. We also have Steve with the affairs that could have been implicated easily and the things that he knew and his position. But we didn't talk a whole lot in our first episode about Justin. Justin is Steve's son, correct? From a prior relationship.
Yes, that is correct.
So I was reading some of what you guys sent, and there were actually concerns about Justin as well in the long run, correct?
Yes, people had concerns about Justin because Nan and Justin had kind of a, let's say, not a wonderful stepmom stepson relationship.
Right. I read that there was some, for lack of better terminology, I guess, touchy-feely interaction between him that she was very uncomfortable with, and then his demeanor. And there was some website searches on how to make a bomb, as well as him being very heavily involved in basically labeling himself a potential serial killer.
He's weird. He's real weird if you.
It sounds that way, but I'm saying that to basically say this. There was multiple theories that we floated out there in the first episode, as well as some theories that some fans sent in anonymously to our email. Justin was one that was not talked about, so that was kind of like a drawback for me because I knew nothing about Justin or even his involvement with the case. So how I guess where I'm leading to this, now that we've talked about the fire, we've talked about the things that came directly related after the fire. That's on y'all then, right? That's not on my end.
Somebody's getting a phone call.
I think it's a
I
phone call
fixed
there.
that problem. Yeah.
No problem. But yeah,
But real quick, just because we touched on law enforcement and the fire, and I was going to bring it up earlier, but we kind of continued on. Just want to step back one little bit. Back to the scene being released Saturday to Steve within just shy or just past the 24-hour mark. You got to remember, like we were saying, that's not unusual on a normal fire scene. But you have a fatality. At this point, which we found out at a later date, we didn't know it then, obviously. The coroner had figured it out and informed the sheriff at this point and the fire marshal's office that Nanette had a gunshot wound to the head. Well, at that point, they knew that before they released the scene. So that tells me and I don't know these people aside from what we've met since this happened, but you either have some of the absolute worst investigation skills, law enforcement and fire, both, that I've ever heard of in this country, or you have some type of help to cover something up, or you have an uncontrollable amount of incompetence, or that's about the only three things I'm seeing are possible when you know you have a homicide and you don't have cause, origin, or anything else on the fire. It hasn't been investigated, and you tell a well-known official in the parish, "You're the fire chief at your house. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but here you go. Here's the scene. We're out of here." I just find that extremely odd.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, sitting here and like you said, hearing Steve say whatever lies he was obviously blurting out of his mouth, but to come up later that they knew she had actually been shot before they released the scene. I told you when you talked
That's
to me.
That's a game changer for me
Right.
because I didn't know that.
I told you when we first met and talked, Randy, that at minimum, just off of what little information we had when we did the first part of this, I said at minimum you're talking, pardon my language, piss poor investigations work. At minimum.
Yeah.
At the very minimum.
Right.
And if you have two agencies for sure, if not a third, with investigative ability and investigators on the scene, not even counting the local district that probably has their own investigator at some level, how do you have a scene that isn't even begun to have been investigated?
I told you in talking, and I'm going to say it again. If they knew before releasing the scene originally that she had a bullet wound, we're not saying that they said murder or suicide. We just know she's got a gunshot wound to the head. Yep. That's a secure scene until we get everything. So that's why I kept saying piss poor police work. Now I would also add to that, since you telling me there's the coroner is informing whoever the investigator out there, hey, we got a bullet wound along with this. I'm at that point, I probably, if I was in a in charge position, would have asked for outside agency to come in to partake in the fire investigation, so that we don't have anybody from anywhere to be able to accuse, oh, well, you did this wrong or you took it light because nope, outside agency, you take it. And I guess you could say they did by the state fire marshal, but I don't know how it is by you. Here in Louisiana, any fire department on any fire that they need an investigator, even if they have their own, can call the state fire marshals in to take over the investigation or do the investigation. So
absolutely, that's exactly how it is here. Even if you have your own, if you're a community that has somebody properly trained, or a large enough city where you have certain people, one or multiple people, certified investigators, you can still call the state fire marshal's office and request an investigator or multiple investigators. And they will have them on the road within an hour.
Correct. I don't know, so I'm going to ask y'all this. At any point, I'm going off of, obviously the house is destroyed, so we got a significant value in that. Based off of what y'all have told us and have stated here tonight, there was numerous weapons throughout the property. Was ATF or any federal agency contacted, or did they come in because of the value of the property, the loss of life, and the weapons?
Actually, I think the first one to contact the FBI was us. We met with a special agent. We spoke with ATF, but I will say from my experience, ATF is interested on a hands-off approach unless there is a firearm there that shouldn't be. But if they were all, in other words, if all those guns are properly owned by Steve and Nanette or are there for a justifiable reason, the ATF has no interest at all, no matter what other kind of crime was involved.
Okay, so with that being said, initially we know it was deemed, accidental, but you're telling me that they knew on the initial investigation she had been shot or had at least a bullet hole in the head. So did they ever? Because I don't remember in my research. Forgive me. Had they ever deemed it a potential suicide? And was that something that Steve tried to argue once his lightning ordeal or lightning excuse kind of fell through?
They knew Saturday morning, less than 24 hours after the initial report of the fire, that she had a bullet wound to the head. They knew where it was on the head. And the sheriff's department was leaning towards suicide. They basically were trying to prepare us for a possible suicide determination early on. And when Steve heard that, around us, he first said, no, Nan would never commit suicide. Then when others were around right in front of us, he's like, well, she might have. You never know. Anybody could do that. So he was starting to try to also plant the seed that suicide might be a possibility.
Okay, so we did have a viewer question come in through some friends of ours out of Ada, Oklahoma. It's the Sirens podcast. It's similar to ours. They do a bunch of true crime, but she had a question. When y'all received the autopsy findings, and I know that was sometime later after they had changed the classification and everything, I remember reading that it was found there was no soot in the lungs, there was no altering of the red blood cells to say that it was carbon monoxide inhalation, anything like that, which would lead him to believe that she was already deceased prior to the fire being set. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. Your facts there are pretty accurate, except we never received the coroner's report. We had to go to the courts, have a judge sign off on a what they call it. Was it a warrant? I don't remember what they called it in Louisiana, but
Probably
basically
a subpoena Dukas taken.
it was a court order telling the coroner that he must allow. We had our own forensic pathologist willing to come in that Dan hired, a well-respected pathologist that's worked in many parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Also led up the entire department for forensic pathology in one state.
Yes.
For many years. And we brought him in person along with a retired state patrol homicide investigator. And when we got to the coroner's building, they went in, they met them. Now remember, this is a well-respected medical doctor that's a forensic pathologist and also a decorated homicide investigator that's retired out of the state patrol. Teaches death scene investigations for a college and many other things. But these are two well-respected people in their professional circles. And they go in, and the St. Tammany Sheriff's Office, the Coroner's Office, and the State Fire Marshal's Office had them greeted by 3 armed men and would not allow them to examine the body, would not allow them to write notes, would not allow them to take any pictures. So all they did was get to talk to the coroner, his doctor that did the actual autopsy, and let them look at some of their notes,
I was gonna
but would
say,
not allow them to make any of their own notes,
Mm.
would not allow them to do an autopsy like the court order said they should. And they were treated like very well. They tried to intimidate them, basically.
right. I was gonna say, I actually got to read. I don't. Do you have a problem if that I say the doctor's name?
No, not at all.
Okay.
You can go
I
ahead,
act,
Doctor Tom Bazzoni, great guy, or
actually
Bennett, Tom Bennett.
Thomas Bennett. And
Yeah,
I did some research on him. You're
Yeah.
correct in that he is an expert by many levels. But I read his report, and I was gonna say the first thing. I mean, he's very detailed in his report. He tells you what time he landed at the airport,
Yeah.
the door he went out of, who picked him up, who drove. So I mean, he had a very detailed report. And when I got to the paragraph where it said he met with the coroner over there and was told, "You can't take pictures, you can't take notes," right off the bat, I was like, "Well, it was almost like we wasted our time sending this man here." I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's why when we brought you on and through the times that I did a little PR about this episode coming up, and I want to do another one because we're not even touching on everything right now, but we're going to retouch on more. It's such eye opening. It's obvious. It's like blatantly obvious. There's something wrong with this investigation from the inception, from the very
absolutely.
from
And
the,
one other thing that I kind of didn't mention, when we got to the coroner's office and they were greeted that way, Kim's father and I, or Nanette's father and I, took Dr. Bennett and uh, Officer Johnson, and we dropped them off. Her father and I did not try to go in the building, but when they went in, at first they were told, no, we're not letting you do anything. Kim's father and I had to go down to the courthouse, and we were trying to find the judge, and we couldn't get in to talk to him or anything. And when he left the building at lunch, I actually approached him outside, told him the problem we were having. And then all of a sudden, after a few phone calls, they let him in, but they didn't let him do anything.
right. I was reading that in a report, and again, I don't want to make this sound like I'm some world-renowned expert in all this, but it's just like you from
Sorry.
the experiences I have. Just nothing adds up good for this investigation as we stand right now. Not from the date of the call, the location of the body, the accelerants that were throughout the house, knowing about the emails that she sent to Dan and family members and her friend explaining what was going on. But we're gonna kind of go a little bit forward because I'd asked y'all about this.
Well, before you move on, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask one question. So, throughout this whole process for a few years before all this took place, she sent a bunch of emails, whether it had been to Dan, to anybody else. Does anyone have knowledge of her actually reporting any of these threats to police or anyone that could have potentially made note of it?
I think that'd be a better question for probably Kim, Gina, or Lori, because they would have been the one that had contact.
When I was texting her, for Kim, she said that she had called the police and made a report because I said, "Did you make a report of this?" Yeah, I did. She felt safe because she was told, that Brian's ankle monitor had GPS in it, which I had never heard of, but whatever. It's an alcohol monitor. But what do I know? I'm no expert in those electronics. And turns out it didn't. But she felt safe because she said he can't come within 1,000 feet of our house.
Okay.
Okay, so with that should be easy. Even through a public records request, we can find out if she ever made any I guess we would, even if over there they do it the same way we did it over here, it would be called a 21, which is a normal citizen's complaint in reference to threats, harassing phone calls, so on and so forth. So it's at least documented. That's what any policeman and any attorney would tell you is get it documented so there's document a paper trail.
All right.
But after we did the first part, and I told y'all this, we got some interactions, and then we got an email, and this is where a lot of stuff started really opening my eyes to where, man, at a part in the first episode, Larry had asked me, what would you do if you was handling this? And I'd said, well, I would have a long-lasting relationship with Brian and Steve. Every day that they walked out, and again, I'm going off of just what information we had at the time. I was like, every day that they walked outside, I'd be walking up going, hey, how you doing? And ask them a question, hey, did you see that the leaves were green? Just so that they know every time you come out, I'm gonna be here. We're gonna try to figure this out here.
Right.
I said, but we got an email, and it stated, y'all are on the right path, but it's so much bigger than what you're even talking about. There is a swingers group over in that area that both Steve and Nanette were possibly involved in, and that one of the adult relationships was between the sheriff and Nanette. And we didn't talk much about it on part one, and after we got the email when we finished part one, me and Larry talked, and I said, before I even say anything on another episode, we got to be able to try to get with an investigator or family members. No, we're not accusing anything, and I'll let you expand on this, Randy or Kim or Lori or Gina. Again, I'm not even judging Nanette off of swingers groups are consenting adults. I believe when we talked, we all agreed to that, Randy. That's not why I'm even bringing it up. I'm bringing it up because, like I told you, and again, I am gonna let you have your words to say on it. My thing is the consensual adult relationship. There's nothing wrong with, but if you're afraid because of your position in today's world that this relationship would bring bad light to you, so you cover a crime, that's a crime.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and this whole case has just done nothing but, if anybody that's listening that is not a family member, but this is your first time listening to this, just go look at what facts are out there and listen to what these family members and best friend are saying about their loved one. And if you don't sit there as just a human being and go, there's something not right here, then you're just fooling yourself. Because I'm telling you, there's something not right here.
Right.
And it disturbs me because I would want, what I'm telling you, and the purpose of this show is, I want justice for Nanette as I would want justice for my sister, my mother, my friend.
Absolutely. So can y'all, just to follow up with that, can y'all elaborate on what was just spoken about?
Well, I don't think, I know myself and Kim, we've all heard the rumors.
Yeah, we've heard it.
We've heard it, but we have no knowledge to say whether it's true or not true. I think that would be a realm, if that's something anyone's involved in. I don't think that's something they go around and telling their family and friends for the most part.
Right.
Right.
So whether it's true or not, I have no reason to believe it is. I have nothing to prove it isn't. But needless to say, it wouldn't matter to me either way. The only concern I'd have is if what you were told is true. If somehow that evidence of that came out, that would just tell me the sheriff had a whole lot of reason to cover up a crime, and it would give a whole lot of answers to why this investigation was done the way it was done.
And
Now, I'm not
that's
saying that's
exactly
why
what we
it
were
was done the
alluding
way
to.
it was done. Yeah, that I'm not saying that's why it was done the way it's done, because we've also heard rumors that, sorry, rumors that Steve and the sheriff were really good friends, drinking buddies.
That Steve and one of the investigators was in this bourbon club
Yeah,
together.
that they were in a
We've
bourbon.
heard so many
We've heard
rumors
so many
about
things
everyone.
that could lead to possible cover up or poor investigation. Now, the things of him being a friend and all that, as I think it's the same anywhere in the country. I don't care how good a friend you are with someone, you're probably not going to try to cover up a murder for them, because that can result in some major trouble for
Right.
yourself.
You would
Yeah.
think not, at
Now,
least.
now, if Steve and the sheriff and Nanette and the sheriff's wife or whoever, or even if it's just Steve and the sheriff that are involved with the swingers club or something, whether Nanette was involved or not involved, that's a lot of reason for the sheriff to cover something up, because that could come out if all of a sudden Steve had a part in this and he's in trouble. He may use that card to try to take a little pressure off himself. So that would give anyone in the sheriff's office reason that maybe, we can say anything, just like we've heard rumors that don't have facts. If anyone in the sheriff's office or this investigation team were involved in a swingers group with Steve, that'd give a lot of people a lot of reason to cover things up or to do a poor investigation.
Right. And see, the email kind of alluded to that. Now, it's all speculation. All speculation. But the email basically was in regards to just a specific swingers club, and that the reason the sheriff was kind of doing a piss poor investigation, so to speak, was because the relationship that transpired between Nanette and the sheriff was not of consensual basis from Steve.
What?
So that was what the email kind of said, was that Nanette and the sheriff were romantically linked, in that part of the agreement between them being involved in the swingers club was that the other party had to consent to the relationship with the other person, which is why all the affairs that Steve had, she was kind of noted to be okay with and didn't leave. But as y'all said, ain't nobody's okay with that type of thing. So basically, like I said, it was alluded that her and the sheriff were romantically linked, and Steve had an issue with it, that they started seeing each other outside of this agreement, and that was the involvement with the sheriff, which would again lead to shoddy investigative work.
But like I said, and in talking to Randy and Kim, and the part of the relationship, if you want to call it the swingers club or whatever,
Right.
that's two consenting adults.
Absolutely.
We might not. The four guests we have on the show may not partake in those type of clubs or partake in adulterous affairs, but that's not the crime.
No, it's not.
If you using that as a motive for a cover up, that's the crime.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what needs to be looked into. If we don't want to verify that there was this relationship because we wanted to go around and tell everybody, "Oh, you're an adulterer."
Right.
We
Nor
want to
are
make
we
sure
trying.
that that's not your reasoning for not fulfilling what you raise your right hand to do as an investigator, and that's you swear an oath to protect and serve to the full. No man is above the law, nor is any man below the law, nor do we ask any man's permission when we want him to obey the law. You do the investigation wholeheartedly. I'm sorry, Randy, I'm your friend. I'm sorry that my investigation revealed that you're a murderer. You're going to jail.
Yeah.
I might not put the handcuffs on you because we're friends. I'm going to let the other guy do it, but I'm going to do my job. Somebody is not well, I don't want to say somebody. Some people are not doing their job, which Nanette deserves. regardless of what she did, was she in the club or not in the, some people are not fulfilling their requirement to fully investigate this, whether it's the sheriff and his department, the coroner and his department, the state police, whoever. It's not being investigated the right way.
And again, this isn't anything factual. This is all speculation. This is rumor, and we're not trying to defame anyone by any means. But if there's a theory to be spoken about, we kind of have to touch on it because there's an infinite realm of possibility. Again, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but talking about it,
But
there was
at the same time, if I had to make I hate to use the term guess, but if I had to make a guess, I would not be shocked at all if some of this was started by Steve to take the emphasis off him for cheating.
I can agree.
Yeah,
I can agree.
both ways. You can't have Steve on the one hand telling me that Nanette approved of his affairs because she was physically unable to have sex, and that's why she agreed to let him have these extramarital affairs. Well, how does that fit with her being a raging swinger? It just doesn't.
Right.
And on top of that, I wanted to talk about it while we were speaking about the autopsy findings from the independent pathologist. It was said that the original autopsy did not include a rape kit analysis, but there was still viable tissue from the inside of the uterus, as well as other potential testable organs. So with the threats that came from Brian about he was going to rape, kill, and burn the house down, was there ever a question from anybody once that information was received, like why wasn't that performed?
Yes, we questioned that because even though Dr. Bennett wasn't allowed to do an autopsy, touch the remains, he was still allowed to physically look at them, even though he couldn't take notes. But he's a smart man and he knows what he's looking at, and he can remember what he's seen an hour later when he takes his notes after he leaves the building. And he said there was enough there to do a rape kit, but they chose not to do it. And that was in his opinion. It may not have resulted in much, but if it was his call, they would have at least done it, because there's a possibility if she was raped, you'd still get some evidence.
Right, and he said something about being knowledgeable about the fact that there were emails and it was reported that someone had made the threat of rape upon Nanette.
Yeah.
So that was why he was so adamant about a rape analysis being performed, right?
Yep, that is exactly right.
And then
because you have previous information that would make you suspect or wonder if there was a rape.
correct. There's so much. That's why I keep referring, and I didn't mean to get, I guess, passionate in my tone and demeanor. It's because of so many pieces of information that are being gained every day that this case moved forward, that it's almost like it's falling on deaf ears and blind eyes. I mean, again, somebody is not doing their job.
Right.
Yeah, and just like the rape kit, like you mentioned, and like Dr. Bennett said, there is so much PC to justify doing a rape kit. Why didn't you make the attempt?
100%.
Another thing that, I mean, and listen, he's a doctor. I'm not questioning his. I'm going strictly off of my experience. If I'm correct, in his report and in talking, he said that the entry wound was to almost the back of the head, behind the ear. Correct?
Yes, behind the right ear.
Right. To me, that is like somebody pinpointed that when the gun was gone off. And somebody that commits suicide, it's a reaction. They quickly do it. And everyone that I've ever been on, the gun goes in the mouth, the gun goes to the temple, because that's what they're thinking. The temple is where you, or under the chin, behind the ear.
They're assuming it's a kill shot.
I've
Yeah.
never. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but on a scale of 1 to 10, 1, because the other nine times.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you. I've never been on a scene of a suicide where someone has shot themselves in the back of the head or close to the back of the head. I've never been to any training where we look over a lot of cases in a 3 or 4 hour period where that's happened. It's just not saying it's impossible, but it is so unlikely.
We want to keep this case in the forefront of St. Tammany. We want to keep this going and keep a light on it, because I know I do. I want it solved, and I know how I feel. Y'all have to have double of that exposure. I wanted to do this way, Facebook Live, because it seemed like we was going to get a lot of attention,
And we got a lot of interaction.
We got a lot of interaction going off on the side with people making comments and questions. So let's do this again.
Yeah, I have one thing before we wrap up. Can y'all, or will y'all put out there anything, any pages, any
yes,
anything that you want the public to know, that they can submit any information, any tips, anything like that? What kind of things do y'all have set up to aid in the investigation?
Well, not to be a smartass, but kind of be a smartass. Don't get murdered in St. Tammany while Randy Smith is sheriff.
Oh man.
Okay.
All right.
That wasn't a smart ass.
So I know they have the Justice for Nanette Facebook page. Is there any other hotlines or tip websites that you can go to submit any knowledge or any tips?
Crime Stoppers down in that area.
Crime Stoppers, I don't know. Do you have one, Randy?
I was saying the same thing. Aside from Crime Stoppers down there and the page that Gina, Kim, and Lori and a few others have going, I don't know where else you do it, but you are welcome to, if anybody has any knowledge, you are welcome to contact Kim, I assume Gina and Lori, through that page, even if it's a private message, and someone will be happy to talk to you on the side.
And we'll add to that, Randy, if any listener out there wants to pass some information to Kim, Gina, Lori, Randy, and you don't know how to get in touch with them, contact us here at the Sound of Sirens. I promise you we can get
we'll
with
put you
them.
in touch. Send us an email, sirenspodcastofficial@gmail.com. We will relay any and all information pertaining to this case to the person that really needs to get it. On top of that, New Orleans Crime Stoppers, you can reach them at 877-903-STOP. That's 877-903-7867. And we said on the last show we were unclear if there was still a reward for information. I know at one point it had reached $10,000. Do y'all know if there's still a reward out there for it?
We believe so.
Okay. So, not that it should be a motivational factor or is money, but you know how people work nowadays. We think there's reward in it. If you or somebody you know knows anything about the surroundings of this case or anything that potentially could have happened, any tip is helpful. Please contact New Orleans Crime Stoppers or us or any of the family members and friends on here today, and let's get that word out here, man. Let's get this case back in the spotlight. Let's get some information out there, and hopefully let's solve this.
Gina, is there anything that you'd like to say before we sign off?
I just wanted to say, I know I said at the beginning that I didn't grow up with Nanette, but she really was a special person in my life, and we were able to communicate a lot online or through the phone, and I just really, like I said, I've shared my birthday with her now the last 6 years, and getting this wrapped up is really important to me because her father, Dan, died a couple years ago without being able to see justice served. And I just hate to see any more time go on. I really appreciate you guys having us on and doing this podcast.
Don't hang up yet. Lori, is there anything you'd like to add?
I mean, I definitely can piggyback on what Gina just said. We really appreciate y'all keeping the spotlight on this case, and between y'all and the media there in New Orleans, they've all been wonderful in trying to keep this story out there. And the more we can keep it in the forefront, hopefully somebody will come forward, because the only way that this, I think, is going to get solved is if, somebody's going to have to talk. And, we need that person to talk, whether it's anonymously or, walking into the police station and talking. Somebody's going to have to say something. And we just really would, want somebody to do that, or if they know something, contact somebody, because we really just need justice for Nanette and for Dan as well.
Absolutely. And again, to echo Brian, we want this solved, speaking for both of us, just as much as the next person. And being this invested into the case was not something we were expecting when we first brought it up. But there's so much that is just so unclear that we really need to be, reevaluated. And a lot of that is just by touching on exactly what everybody knows happened, and maybe it'll jog somebody's memory, maybe it'll touch somebody's heartstrings that's listening, that has that information. But I promise, and I give you this from the both of us, we will not stop discussing this case until some kind of headway is made.
Randy and Kim, in the short time that we've talked, I consider y'all good friends now in those 3 conversations. So is there anything you'd like to add before I close this out?
I don't think I have a whole lot to add, because I think I'll go on forever if I do. But I look forward to having another show like this and getting further involved and giving more information that we have. And hopefully other people can make some connections that maybe we haven't noticed yet.
I will end it with this. Gina, I don't know that I can promise you this, but I'm going to guarantee you that we will do everything we can that for Dan and you and Kim and Randy and Lori and your extended family and friends, that we will help to keep this a number 1 priority until we get it solved.
Absolutely. If there's anything that we can do for you all, whether it be promotion on Facebook, posting anything, if y'all have any vigil or anything set up, or if you know of any event taking place that can maybe shed some light, if another podcast or media outlet decides they want to jump in and start to discuss, please don't hesitate. Reach out. We'll share that. We'll get that information out there. Like I said, this is just as important to us now as the next person, and we definitely want to see some headway or some conclusion to this horrible, horrible tragedy.
I want y'all to have a good night. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say that means a lot to me. It's really great to hear those words from someone. We wish we could hear that from law enforcement, but we'll take it where we can.
Yes, thank you so much from the bottom of our heart. We really appreciate it.
Thank y'all for coming on. Listen, have the rest of a good night. God bless y'all. Randy and Kim, I'm going to give y'all a break.
Yeah,
at the end of the week, I'll get with y'all. Randy, I know you'll appreciate this when I say it. Tomorrow, you go get you some ice cream, buddy. Y'all have a good night, and
that might be a possibility.
and thank y'all all everybody that's listened tonight. You will hear it again tomorrow. It will be uploaded to the normal podcast platforms, and we will advertise soon as we can when we're going to have Nanette Watson's family back on and let's bring some closure and justice to Nanette.
Absolutely.
Till then, have a good night. I'm Brian Miller.
And this is Larry Frederick. This is the Sound of Sirens podcast. Y'all all have a blessed night, and we look forward to having another episode just like this. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.